Hello, everybody. Uh, this is John Marcotte from Heroic Girls. As you can see, I'm still not great at producing this show, but it's going to be great. I can tell you that it's going to be good. I am here, as always, with my friend Vivian. Vivian, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Vivian. I'm an animator and an Imagineer here on my own personal capacity.
And and we are talking today about one of my favorite books. Let me get it in camera here. Batgirl Year One by Scott Beatty and Chuck Dixon as a writing team, and Marcos Martin on art. And Alvaro Lopez should be mentioned too. He's the anchor on it. And it's always hard to know exactly where the breakdown of who's doing what is when they team up like that. But he's on the front cover, so I'm suspecting he had quite a bit to do with the look and feel of the book as well. Um, I'll do a little summary first. We can do that, and then we'll dig in. Batgirl Year One is an interesting book, actually. It came out in 2003, and it tells the origin story of the Barbara Gordon version of Batgirl, the original Batgirl. And what was interesting about it is at that point in time in DC Comics continuity, Batgirl had been shot in the spine and paralyzed by the Joker since 1988 in The Killing Joke. So we were and she would not get to walk again until 2012, I think, in the New 52. They brought her back. And so we were in the middle of a big valley where this version of Batgirl had not existed for 15 years and wouldn't walk again for another like 10 or so. So this was a weird time to throw out an origin story for her, but I am so glad they did because I just love this book so much. So it tells the story of the Batgirl, how she started. Barbara Gordon is Commissioner Gordon's daughter. She had no desire at first to be a costume vigilante. She wanted to be a police officer like her father, but her father wouldn't let her do that, and she was also too short. So then she tried to apply to the FBI, and her credentials were impeccable, and they said, "You'd be great, but you're too short." So she tried the kind of legal avenues of doing, helping out the way that she could, and those were denied to her. So one evening there is a big costume party to benefit the police, and she's invited as the commissioner's daughter, and she decides to dress up like Batman just to tweak her dad's nose a little bit. That he partners with a vigilante and everything. I did not tell her father that she was going to dress as Batman, so she shows up in the Batgirl costume. And Killer Moth, a C-rate villain at best, shows up and tries to kidnap Bruce Wayne, which I would have loved to see how that played out if she hadn't shown up. But and he knocks out her dad, and so she, without thinking, kind of leaps in to save the day and manages to drive Killer Moth and his goons off and is chasing them down. And he turns around and faces her and he says, "Better luck next time, Batgirl," or something along those lines. And one of the things I love is that she immediately hates that. She's like, "Great, I'm going to be stuck as Batgirl the rest of my life." So the rest of the book is kind of tracking her development as a crime fighter. Batman's completely against the idea at first. He does not want what he considers an amateur, I think, to be messing around in this area. Doesn't think she's trained enough, has the desire enough to do this. So Batman and Robin are kind of playing good cop, bad cop. Robin likes her in more than one way. Robin likes her, which is a bit of foreshadowing, actually. And also her fights with Killer Moth, which Killer Moth himself is not really that big of a problem, but he attracts the attention of another costume vigilante, a new one, Firefly, who is psychotic. I mean, he's crazy and deadly, and we're given some subtle hints that he likes just watching women in particular burn, which is that's not. So he perks up at the idea that there's a Batgirl, and he specifically wants to get her. So it's a I don't know, coming of age story isn't exactly the right thing, but maybe kind of a coming of age story. It's coming of superhero age story about how she made this journey to where she is a full-fledged member of the Bat team, and Bruce actually reveals his secret identity and everything at the end and tells them why they're doing it, which is nice. So that's kind of the summary. So what do you want to do first? You want to tackle? You want to say a little something about what you thought of the book? Where would you land on it?
I really liked it. I wish maybe that there had been more women on the writing team.
Yeah.
I'm curious kind of how maybe some of the dialogue could have gone between Barbara and Dinah when they were able to
Yeah.
come into contact with each other. That wasn't talking about like their weight, and it's kind of like two people like, well, what did the girls talk about when they're alone together? And it's like, well, they could have talked about the motorcycle they're riding, but maybe there was like a little bit of a lack of understanding there. But other than that, like I really, really like this story, and I'm so glad that you pointed out kind of her history of being disempowered and sort of like she's definitely, I think, an inspirational character and also an aspirational character. And when people point to characters who are wheelchair bound, they would normally point to Professor X and her, really, right? As people who you can say like, oh, you don't have to be a super athlete to help people, right? At the same time, it was so great to see her in her youth and starting out. And as much as this is maybe a coming of age story, it also kind of feels like well, you finish college, what's next, right? And then she basically just has the coolest what's next story. She has her degree and she wants to use it, but there's no place that will admit her. And so that kind of like too girly, too short, too small, all those things that like, you question that, right? Because like, oh, is there a man who's too short for the FBI? Probably not, right? And so she's getting barriers thrown up. And so like the way that she circumvents them and the way she thinks about herself, her inner monologue and stuff is really interesting.
Yeah, and I got the book up. So I agree completely. And let me make this full screen so we don't have to look at it ugly. It's about the weight thing. I will do one thing to defend their choice to have her ask how much she was weighing. They were chasing the bad guys in a motorcycle, and Barbara was about to drive up a tree trunk through a wall of flame. And I think she wanted to make sure that the tree trunk wasn't going to collapse under them. That was the purported reason for that. It didn't just come up, because they were, talking about things that the guys had seen in a Summer's Eve commercial or something. So, yes, but yeah, having men write women's characters can sometimes leave blind spots like that. And, things where they're guessing at things when they really shouldn't be and not making the best guesses all the time, that kind of thing. So I agree. It would have been better if they had a female writer on the team. But that said, I really do like this one, so I'm not going to criticize it too much. And I have to tell my Chuck Dixon bit, which is Chuck Dixon, who was probably the main creative force on everything, a longtime DC writer. He did big runs on Birds of Prey. He created Birds of Prey. He did a big run on The Punisher for Marvel. He's also just, frankly, kind of not a great. He's a misogynist, and he's a very right-wing reactionary politics. He's drawn some like anti-Clinton comic books because the world needs more of those. And this is just one of those ones, just separate the art from the artist, because I love this book. And you have to also look at it as a team project. He's not the only one involved. Maybe the tempering of Scott Beatty is what gave us the book that we like, and you can't deny the visual appeal of Marcos Martin's art. It's just brilliant. So I'm going to argue also that Batgirl is a better character than Batman. She is more human, more relatable. I mean, Batman's just coming from this alien place where he's running around all the time. My parents are dead, and he's just he's the DC Justice League pantheon sometimes is compared to gods. I mean, and Batman's definitely this dark god of vengeance, and a lot of the time it is very difficult to make him relatable on any sort of human level. He's this superhuman justice vengeance machine that doesn't seem to have human feelings and emotions. Batgirl's doing it, and she doesn't have to have this big "my parents are dead" backstory. She's doing it because it's the right thing to do. It's because she's frankly Commissioner Gordon's daughter. She sees the problems that Gotham faces, and she wants to do her part to help. And definitely she's more likable. If you had to spend time alone with one of these characters, you're definitely going to pick Batgirl over Batman. But I've always enjoyed her as a character, particularly when she's been written by women. Gail Simone's run on Batgirl is one of my favorite things on the planet. And so all right, let's talk about some of the like themes and things like that. Or do you want to do art first? I'll let you. Do you want to do the coin toss?
Oh, we can do the art first because it's so beautiful.
Yes.
It's really incredible. A lot of frames built around silhouettes, like a lot of that heavy use of like the Gotham black skyline. But it's not totally devoid of color, which is, I think, a lot of times when you think of Gotham, you think of like, oh, it's a noir. It's like black and white, and then you see like maybe Robin is like a little bit of green and yellow, like off to the side. But I think they did a really great job of keeping it noir. There's an aspect of it that feels period, even though they still have all the, bat tech. It's not super bat computers and everything. Yeah, like there's so much of this frame that's black, but it doesn't read that way because there's so much cool use of the color, and the design of the characters is amazing. Martin Dixon does a great job of Martin Dixon. Marcos Martin does a great job of, having Barbara. She looks so young and she looks very slight, but when she's fighting, she looks very powerful. And
she looks like she has her body and her weight behind her. It reminds me of actually how they used to draw Batman back in the day. Steve Ditko's Batman was like spindly and everything, did not look like the muscle was there until you saw him fight, except I think Martin had Dixon's work to build off of, so it's even better.
For sure. Yeah, she's like an Arrow, and so I think it looks really great when she's in action. That's a beautiful, like these are all beautiful frames. Like I could just sit here and stare at all of this. Like they do a really great job of building the themes and the tones of where the story is at into the frames as well. I think the first time that Robin was introduced, I noticed that everything in his frames were the color of his uniform.
His outfit he had a red shirt on and green pants with a yellow star on the shirt, which is the red with the yellow Robin symbol and the green pants.
Issue 2, page 14. Sorry, I'm just gonna hold up my phone. So it's like a frame within a frame. You see that?
Yeah, I'm gonna try to go back to that. Oh wait, we're looking at Rope Girls merchandise. Let me. I'm not sure where we went to. Oh, I see. Hold on. We went. Well, give me a second. Technical difficulties. I'll come back to it.
Also, love that pose for Robin as well.
Yeah, that was a fun one. This was my frame that I picked out just to show the that she did not like the name Batgirl. That was something she was opposed to. Now I am Batgirl forevermore, and I can already see that I'll never be comfortable with the name. It's pretty much says she would have much preferred Batwoman to Batgirl, which I appreciate. They're the fellows we're thinking that, because it's always been a bit problematic that the female heroes were traditionally girls and the men were manly men, though, and they got the full man nomenclature. So
sure. Well, I mean, that also maybe works a little bit that they aged her down.
Well, it's where she started in the comics. It's just she's been around a while now, so she is older. Although they de-aged her again recently. In a soft way. They didn't reset continuity or anything, but they did the Batgirl Burnside storyline where she went back to college, and all of a sudden they just pretended that she's not supposed to be 30 years old or something. Now she's back in college. So that
I think in this comic she is somewhere between 16 and 18. She finished college early, so she is a very young person herself. And the other thing I really like about the design of her costume is that she's not wearing a Batwoman costume or a Batgirl costume. She's wearing Batman's costume because the whole point of what she's wearing was that she was dressed up as Batman. The only thing that makes her a derivative of that is that her hair's sticking at the back of her cowl. So,
I was looking for your page and I found this one and I had to stick it up and just admire it for a little bit at the sense of dynamism and action in it. You get such a great sense of motion with the cape flowing out, her leg. You can tell she just did her roundhouse kick there, and then Killer Moth flying back into the bookcase. That's a pretty nice shot there. So
a lot of low angles, a lot of canted angles,
a lot of high angles, a lot of stuff like up at the ceiling shooting down at people. That was one of the things I really noticed about Martin's art was he didn't keep the camera static. He moved all over the place.
Yeah, for sure. It was it made the action sequences very cool, and I think it also really helped with the chapter when Black Canary comes in and you're hopping around on the timeline. I was very grateful that this was all being drawn by an amazing artist who could really help us track what was happening, because I was starting to lose. I was like, oh my gosh, what's happening? But it was, he did a great job interpolating all that.
That brings up a great point, though. Yeah, there is a part halfway through the book where she ends up briefly teaming up with Black Canary. And that's something else to note, is that Batman was not her personal hero, that she dressed up like Batgirl because she wanted to be Batman. She wanted to be Black Canary. She had a female heroine that she looked up to, and that she had tried to reach out to and failed once, but ended up teaming up with her anyways. But I also thought that was a nice note, that it wasn't just that she was so in awe of Batman. In fact, every time they meet, she makes it pretty clear she doesn't really care what Batman thinks. She's going to do what she wants to. Batman is shown as being hyper competent because he's Batman, and that's what he is. But Barbara is neither frightened of him or inspired by him. He's just a thing, and he's shown her a way to do something that maybe she wouldn't have occurred to her otherwise. And I think she finds it useful to be Batgirl, but I don't think it's due to this like fan worship of Batman that you might have gotten with a different take on the character.
Yeah, Batman's almost a non-entity in this story. He sort of is. He himself is stepping back. He's kind of empowering her from the shadows. Like, I don't think he wants her to get hurt, but he does go on a Batman business trip towards the finale, and he's completely absent. Yeah. And I really like that they just kind of removed him as either like an obstacle to her, like they she's getting the tech via Robin with Batman's authorization. I'm sure it's like Batgirl PO coming into like on the Bat cards, but that I appreciated that, because it would turn it into a different type of story. Same thing, I think, if they had used Joker or Solomon Grundy, like if there had been bigger bads, it would feel like less of her story. But it's still definitely Barbara's story, and it's her Gotham and her villains, and it's really well structured.
And although Killer Moth, I don't think you ever get a huge sense of menace from him. He's kind of bumbling. Firefly is legit. I mean, there's a real danger with that guy, and the stakes get raised on her, and she isn't even quite aware of it at first. Halfway through the book when Firefly enters the picture, and Batman comes from a place of. She's going to quit. She's going to give up. She's not ready for this. But Batgirl slowly earns his trust and respect throughout the book until at the end he's willing to reveal who he is. And they play a good cop, bad cop game where he pretends he's completely disapproving, and then he's giving Robin like, here, let her have some tech, let her have some gear, give her a motorcycle. Robin telling her that he's doing it all on his own, but that's not true. Batman's actually behind that. And I love the way that they made Commissioner Gordon not an idiot. Her father figured out it was her pretty early on in the book. And here's something where you can thank Batman and Robin. They play a fun game, which is kind of a throwback to the old comics of the 50s and 60s, to get Batman off the scent, or get Commissioner Gordon off the scent that it's Barbara. Batman brings Batgirl and introduces her to the commissioner. And then Barbara walks up on the door and said, "Oh, you forgot your lunch, Dad." And it's because they have Robin dressed up as Batgirl, and he's basically saying, "I'm not paid enough for this," at some point to do that. And I thought that was kind of a clever nod.
Very satisfying.
Very satisfying. One of the, but Commissioner Gordon had it down cold. He suspected early, and then he pretty much nailed it down, and he was about ready to confront people on it. And then Batman helped Batgirl throw them off the scent. But that is a kind of continuing theme in the book, though, is one of the themes I picked up on, is the idea that she is underestimated, and both how that's a hindrance to her life and how she uses it to her advantage. I mean, they mention her doing jujitsu, and judo comes in, which are the perfect martial arts for someone her size to know, because they're about using your opponent's weight against them. So if you're going to be that short and that small and no martial arts, that's a good one to pick up on. And so here's a great scene I want to put up here, and I pulled it up, and there we go. This is her sensei, her martial arts instructor, who has just broken her down and says that she didn't want it bad enough. That was to be a martial artist, and she let her. She started crying, which it turns out to be an act. And when he turned his back to her, she just completely took him down and was threatening to wrench his arm out of his socket, because he dismissed her as ineffectual and incompetent. And the second you did that, she had the advantage. She turned what he perceived as her weakness to her advantage, which I think is a good way of explaining how the character operates in this space where, they have, people that can throw cars at you and stuff like that. If she's continually underestimated because of her size or because Batman's over there and is the bigger threat, that allows her to, take on people maybe that normally she couldn't have, especially when she's first starting here. This is really early in her career.
Yeah, there's a couple of things like that where I feel like they, as a theme, like being underestimated is great. There's the young police officer whose name is Jason Bard, who I totally thought he was going to turn out to be somebody. I was like, I don't know. For some reason, there was so much a highlight on him. I thought that he was going to turn out to be like Dr. Fate or something, but just somebody else. But he really is just.
That's Jason Blood. That's a different Jason. But
the Etrigan. Etrigan. There was a kid wearing an but there was a kid in an Etrigan mask in the costume shop when she goes to look for a costume. But I like when she meets him, he basically has the job that she wants, right? He's a young officer, and of course he's injured, and they have a really lovely conversation about how he can keep being effective at helping people, even if he's not, even if he can't be, the beat cop anymore. And then at the end, he ends up opening his own private detective agency, with her help. So I feel like, you see Barbara go on that journey, but she also helps people in their journeys as well of being underestimated. And
she and Jason have a love and romance history in the comics. He opened up his private detective agency, so in later Batgirl stories, they partner up on a lot of things, and she uses him not in a sexual or in a bad way, but she gets his help to investigate different crimes and stuff like that. So this is interesting seeing the beginning of that relationship, because it's just introduced as a fact at some point in the comics that they know each other from when he used to be on the police force, but we never saw that beginning interaction. It is interesting to see how, and maybe this is the guys writing it again, she is positioned as the object of desire for multiple different people in here. Robin, who is of course too young for her right now, she calls him short pants, which is just awesome. And then there's a guy that's in the library that wants to ask her out, but is too intimidated by her to ask her out. And then of course Jason here. And so, I guess there's might be some commentary about an attractive woman moving and entering into a man's world type thing. There might be something to say there, but I do think that was also a little bit of guys are writing it. She's pretty, so I had to figure out ways to highlight that at different points. This Batgirl, this version of Batgirl, and this version of Robin in the future become love interests until Robin decides that he would rather date an alien. That has to be a bummer, that when he leaves you for an alien. But
alien princess. What are you gonna do?
Alien princesses are hard to compete with.
I think the other fun thing about her as a female character, pairing her with Black Canary, who's also does Black Canary have super strength, or does she just have her voice power?
She has the Canary Cry, and she is one of the top 4 martial artists in the world. I think at some point nerds rank this stuff, and it's DC canon that she's close to the top. I always say that Black Canary should be able to take Batman, just because Batman can't shatter concrete with his voice, and she's almost as good a martial artist as he is. So between the two of them, I think she should have a good shot.
Just as a person who can't shoot webs or bench press a car, I thought she was a really great person to pair Barbara with.
Yes.
And then at the thing that kind of puts them in each other's spheres, interestingly, both has to do with their fathers, because Dinah's father's detective practice is destroyed in a fire, and that is where Barbara's father is kidnapped from. So it was interesting that there was kind of a through line about legacy and protecting legacy, and how do you make it your own, right? They've both strayed from what their fathers have done, but they've kind of become more of what they could be, what they could have been.
And interesting time. Now in the DC universe, I think at this point, because it's post-crisis, there were 2 Black Canaries. Batman's mother was the original Black Canary, who did not have superpowers. Although they've changed that so many times that I don't want to swear to it at this point. But originally, that was the idea, that she was a legacy hero. Her mother had been the original Black Canary in World War II, and then she was and that detective agency that got firebombed. Who should buy it but a young Jason Bard? That's where he's opening shop at the end of it. The police detective that she was helping establish himself as a detective. So there was that kind of, even though Lance's name's no longer on the front, it's going to still do the same exact kind of work where they're, on the right side of the law, helping people out, that kind of thing. So that was a nice touch too. There were a few references to different, Batman creators in there and Batgirl creators. They mentioned Denny O'Neil at one point. It's like, O'Neil Company does something like that. But the one that I really caught was this guy. Let me see if I can bring it up. And if you can see this right here, authorized eyes only. It's the location of the Justice Society's headquarters is at 1940 Fox and Gardner Brownstone headquarters. They're at the corner of Fox and Gardner. Gardner Fox is the writer for DC that created both the Justice Society of America and Batgirl. He didn't create Batgirl. He created Barbara Gordon. He was the first one in the 40s to create Barbara Gordon as a character, the commissioner's daughter. And she kicked around for about 20 years before she decided to be Batgirl. But I thought that was just kind of a nice nod. If you are familiar with, at a nerd level of like who's been writing Batman, who are important creators in Batgirl's life and things like that, they're peppered all the way through here. Denny O'Neil was in there, who was a writer and editor on the Bat books. Batman used to have one editor that would be in charge of anything related to Batman and his family to keep them all kind of on the same page so they didn't, contradict each other all the time. And he did that job for like 20 or 30 years or something. He was definitely doing it when this book came out. So, that was kind of a fun, nod there too. And if you have that kind of background comics knowledge, it's fun to find all the different ways they worked it in. I had to check because I knew Gardner Fox was a person who said, what's the 1940? And then I did not know that Gardner Fox had created the Justice Society in 1940, which is why that's their address. So I thought, oh, that's cool. It's a nice little Easter egg hunt that you can engage in here too. And I like when books kind of acknowledge the history of the medium and things like that. I mean, comics are a very insular world, and the people that are reading comics are generally comic book nerds who know or want to know things like that. So I appreciated that they put stuff like that in there for me. I also
can you pull that frame up again?
Yeah.
Because I really liked that she used her hair flattener to reseal that envelope. And there's whenever you can use like little touches, props from a person's life, someone who's being scrappy. She doesn't have all of Batman's tools, and she actually makes fun of him a couple times for being, kind of dependent on all these things. And she realizes right away, like, Batman must be really wealthy to afford all of these things.
She was close to figuring out who he was. I think if she had decided it was important, that she was completely capable of figuring out who Batman was. She just didn't care that much. So
she was doing her own thing. So I really appreciated that touch of her, like
that is good. And I recognize it because I have 6 sisters, 2 daughters, a wife, and the hair straighteners have been around. Mine do the flat irons, and I didn't really process it. That was what she was doing, but that is funny. She's I do like that before she even fully becomes Batgirl, she is shown as completely hyper competent, and they showed that she's going down that path. She broke into the Justice Society of America's headquarters and erased all traces that she had done so. That's just, that would be like she broke into the Pentagon or something. I mean, that's the kind of thing we're talking about. The Justice Society, for people who don't know, was the original Justice League back in the 1940s. It was the very first team-up book with all the superheroes. They got together like Green Lantern, Wonder Woman, all the big heavy hitters from back in the day. What is interesting about it was that those all weren't at the time owned by the same company. So it was a huge deal. It would be like Marvel and DC loaning characters and everything, putting them together. DC eventually bought all the companies that made those independent books, like The Flash and stuff, and got them all under their own wheelhouse. But at the time, it was the first crossover book. And so after rebooting their universe like 5 or 6 times, they've decided that that team is still alive in some fashion for some reason and doing good work. And so the Justice Society was the basis for the Justice League, and they are headquartered out of Gotham. So that ties it all up. So yeah, there also is some nice stuff about. There's some foreshadowing of the Joker. You mentioned the Joker would have been too overpowering a villain would have commanded so much attention. But this was written at a time when the Joker, everyone who was reading this book probably was aware that the Joker ends up shooting and paralyzing Barbara and puts her in a wheelchair. Again, we hadn't seen her in action in 15 years when this book came out. And so there are about 2 or 3 references to the Joker, and they're all made kind of briefly and obliquely, but it is very clear that they're using some foreshadowing techniques here to let us know that the Joker is going to end up being a really big and bad part of her life. And this was my favorite one, I think. Let me, there's 2 that I think are kind of important. And we'll bring up the first one, and that's not this page. So let me try again. Go back a couple. There it is. In the top left corner, it's her dad actually is shown in shadow and laughing with the ha ha ha. It's a very Joker-esque looking moment, and the text reads, she has been talking about the Greek prophetess Cassandra, who could see the future. She was an oracle, but no one would ever believe her, and she had to hide her identity behind a mask because she was blamed for all the things that went wrong. And so they read this: even as they washed away the ashes and blood of their ruin, they laughed at her. And then we get this image of blood and ruin and laughter. It's this neat foreshadowing of the Joker that I thought was a pretty nice callback, since people kind of knew where the story ultimately has to end, which is with Barbara and confronting the Joker. And that was one of my favorite things when they brought Barbara back as Batgirl. And in the very early run of her comics, she ends up fighting the Joker again in this great Gail Simone written story, and she just beats the snot out of him, which is just so satisfying. I mean, it's in the book, in the Killing Joke, she's at her dad's making, they're having Thanksgiving or something like that, and there's a knock at the door. She opens it. It's the Joker, who immediately shoots her in the spine. She has no chance to fight or do anything. It just catches her completely unaware. So yeah, she takes him up and she's punching him and naming the body parts as she hits him, and said that this is your solar plexus, and that's your spleen. And said, and then the last frames are going, this is your goddamn spine, and she punches him right in the back. Very cathartic. I really enjoyed that moment. But and in the end, she's doing. Batman has this big training facility in his cave, and she's going through it for the second time. The first time she was unprepared. She didn't have all the gadgets and everything, but she still did very well. But some of the bad guys died. They have a simulation, and she had killed bad guys. Batman said, "You're not ready because bad people died." And Robin points out she doesn't have all the cool gadgets. She probably would have been able to do it. And then by the end of the book, she's given them, and she's taking out not just pedestrian like guys with guns and stuff. She's fighting the supervillains, and so the Joker is there, and he's dressed exactly as he is dressed in the Killing Joke. He has the wide brimmed hat, and exactly the same way he's drawn. He's drawn exactly the way that who did the Killing Joke? It's a great cover artist that did all the Ant-Man covers, not Ant-Man, Animal Man covers. God, that's gonna bug the crud out of me, because that's a really good artist that I like. But
Brian Bolland,
yeah. Fantastic artist. Killing Joke's a great book, and everybody should buy it. So what else can we say about this?
I mean, I will also say too that I'm so the last thing that I've seen Barbara walking in was that DC animated Killing Joke, and that made me want to pour acid on my own head. And so this was a great way to sort of just can I just set that aside and never think of that ever again. And I don't even want to talk about it. It's so annoying.
I don't blame you there. The Killing Joke was written by Alan Moore, who's considered to be one of the greatest comic book writers in the world. And at the time, DC's Batman books, I believe, were being edited by Len Wein, who's the guy who created Wolverine, longtime comic book guy. And so Alan Moore was contracted to write a Batman story, and he asked if he could paralyze Barbara Gordon. super problematic in that story, she is used as a plot device for the men. Her feelings and considerations never enter the story. The Joker shoots her in the spine and tortures her. It's very highly implied that he raped her, just to show Commissioner Gordon's photos of it to try to drive him crazy. So she's not even, he doesn't even care about her other than torturing her will make Commissioner Gordon feel bad. And we never are really put in her shoes as to how she will feel about it. Moore evidently regrets the story now. He said it was a bad idea. But the story is that he asked Len Wein if he could do this, and he said, "Yeah, go ahead, shoot the bitch." Which, wonderful, Len. Thank you. I appreciate that. And it was a great. She was sidelined, and other writers at DC did not like that. Fortunately. John Ostrander and his wife, and I think it's Mary, and I don't want to, but they were working on the Suicide Squad at the time, and they were just aghast that basically the problems we identified. There was no agency given to her in the story. She was just used as a prop to draw an emotional reaction from the male heroes. And so they created the persona of Oracle for her. She was a unseen person who was giving the Suicide Squad tips and help via the computer for a while, and then they eventually revealed she was Barbara Gordon. And then as Oracle, even though it came from like the worst of possible places, I loved the character of Oracle. Barbara, when she was in the wheelchair, eventually she founded the superhero team, the Birds of Prey, and ran her own team. And again, someone who could, like Amanda Waller or something, she could just go toe-to-toe with Batman and say, "No, we're doing it my way," and she could get him to back down. Or like only a handful of people on the planet that could even come close to doing it. And wheelchair-bound Barbara Gordon was probably my favorite. So I actually did not, when they brought her back as Batgirl, I had some mixed feelings because there had been other Batgirls in her absence that I thought were perfectly wonderful characters as well.
Yeah.
And I thought, it's easy to have a different person be Batgirl. It is very hard to replace Oracle. That character is very special, and they made a kind of a half effort at it, but I didn't really stick. That it's hard to come up with a completely unique and different backstory for a woman in a wheelchair that founds her own superhero team and stuff. That's tough. So I almost regretted that they brought her back, but I do love the character. So I just miss Oracle every now and then.
Yeah, well, I think that's also the benefit of these types of comic book storylines, is that you can sort of think of them in a multiverse kind of way, where there's different versions of them existing simultaneously. And her storyline as a survivor, as a character, she's a survivor of bad writers, right? Like people who wanted to brutalize her body, like for their, for their own, to their own ends, like not to serve her character. But it's wonderful that there was people there to sort of pick up the pieces and have her keep going, because she's such a great role model, like from what she survived, right? And she's not a victim. She's the person who, like you said, like builds the next team and keeps going. So
yeah,
she's a spectacular character in that way. But of course, I do really love to see her flipping and flying and judoing everybody around her. I think in this story too, when she takes on who was that? Blockbuster.
Oh yeah.
Train. And she goes from kind of like helping people, stopping purse snatchers, to having a motorcycle ride through a subway system with Robin, getting on top of a moving train, and then fighting one of not a Bane level big bad, but like a pretty bad.
That's not a bad comparison. He's like low grade Hulk. He's not. Yeah. When he takes his serum, he's not smart, but he's super strong in the like crush metal car with his hand type of strong.
Yeah, and he hates Smish instead of Smash.
Yeah, instead of Smish instead of Smash. But he's a Marvel comparison would have been Mr. Hyde, who's like kind of not a huge villain. He hasn't been brought up in a while, but he was a member of the Masters of Evil with Baron Zemo, so there's that. But anyways, and again, it's that escalation, though. They show us step by step as Barbara is facing tougher and tougher opponents, and she ends up having to basically face him alone, and manages to take care of business against a guy that could easily have just snapped her in half like a twig at any moment. So we're taken on this path along with her of her getting more and more confident at it. She starts out pretty good, and by the end of it, you get a feeling she can handle herself against almost anyone. Both from the practice she gets and from the assist with technology and training from Batman. I liked that little note, which is it sounded true when she jumps off a building and is going to try the swinging from buildings thing. Batman actually cuts her line, and then Robin swoops in and saves her while she's dropping. And then she finds out Batman cut the line. She's pissed. She kicks Robin away. And so I don't know what her plan was. We're going to plummet to death together because I didn't like that Batman did this. But Batman saves them both, and then it turns out the line she picked out from a climbing thing, even though it could support her weight, had no give in it. So if she jumped off a building and then caught it somewhere and then it tightened up, it would have just sliced her fingers off or just pulled her arm out of the socket. So she's like getting that kind of thing, that kind of assist from Batman, just stuff that it's great that you can learn stuff on your own, but at the cost of all your fingers, maybe not the best way to learn. So
right.
I appreciated that.
Yeah, it's a great nod to the verisimilitude of what they're trying to accomplish, and also the fact that they're all human. I love that they can't fly and they can't shoot laser beams. She's going online and ordering boxes of tools for herself to crime fight with, and so she's trying to do what she sees, and and then I think later towards the end, her sort of ingenious with those lines come back again. She's able to down a helicopter. Using those zip lines. So now
that she knows exactly how much weight they can handle and how they work, she stopped the bad guys from getting away and downed their helicopter using the same lines that had been a problem for her earlier. That's a good catch. I like that.
Yeah, and I think also too that she jumps. And that's the craziest part of all of that, right? Is that she jumps off of a building.
What's great, what I loved about that scene was that we see it from Batman and Robin's view after we see her walk up there. And Robin says, I bet you she's not going to do it. And Batman says, it's too late. She's already jumped. And she hasn't yet. But what he's saying is she's done it up here. She's already she's thrown herself out there. She's going to do it. And Batman had a better read on that aspect of her character than Robin did. Robin, who is completely infatuated with her. Robin did crack who she was before Batman did, but that's because he had a thing for her when she was not Batgirl. He was fully prepared to identify her by the freckles on her nose, which he had evidently been studying. So I thought that was kind of amusing. I like that better in this kind of past tense thing where we know that eventually they do become a real couple, and the age difference when he's like 16 and she's 20 is insurmountable. But then a little later when she's 26 and he's 30, it's not that, or other way around, she's 30 and he's 26, not that big a deal. So it eventually his unrequited love is comes to fruition. Yeah, Barbara has no time for him at this point. It's she actually, I believe, when she realizes that he was checking her out at one point, the word was "ew." That's not doesn't like that the teenage kid has a crush on her, which I thought that was amusing.
It's treated with about the same seriousness as all the other people who are ogling her or asking her out. She's just kind of like, ew. And
whatever, and it. The guy in the library never had a shot. He's probably the kind of guy that grows up in haunts forums saying that women don't like nice guys. But he's that guy. I could see it in him. And the officer, I think there might have been a shot for the police officer, and eventually I think that does happen in an arc of the comics that they are a romantic couple. And Robin's just too young, but I thought that was nice. Poor guy, and he gets there. He never lacks for confidence. He is going for it. He does the steals a kiss thing while they're going like 80 miles an hour on motorcycles through a subway tunnel. All right, well, he's ballsy. I'll give him that.
I do love how different all their personalities are, because I feel like if there's a Batman and then there's a sidekick, I think there could be the threat that they all kind of become same note, but they definitely have their very distinctive personalities. And I love the version of Robin he's so youthful and he's so and he's so athletic, right? Like he
Yeah.
and they're able to bring in that like his circus backstory just with his
Yeah.
physicality.
This is something that I don't know how much of a comics aficionado you are and whether you've picked up on this. Robin, as an adult, in his Nightwing persona, is he's evidently the guy that the women like. The best male ass in the comic book universe is what they constantly give into him. They like the gymnast build a lot better than the like bulked up steroid cases that most of the male heroes are. There's where you get the difference between a female sexual fantasy and a male power fantasy. Those aren't always the same thing, as
Not
much
the
as
same
guys will
thing.
try to tell you that they are. And yeah, Nightwing is, and his older incarnation is definitely that whole persona. He becomes quite a hit with the ladies. They actually did a whole series with him briefly as Dick Grayson, where he became a secret agent for some spy agency that exists only in the DC universe. And it was just him as himself. And that was one of the things. He ends up wearing a mask for a part of it because it's distracting for the women, and it's just too much for them. The Dick Grayson, it's played for laughs, not as like some serious thing, but it's entertaining. So just you go know, Robin, if you hold on, you hold out there, eventually you do not have a problem with the ladies at all. They're making a Batgirl movie. I think we should actually discuss the Batgirl movie. Were you aware of this? I know you're with the mouse, but it's over at Warner Brothers.
Leslie,
you watch Warner Brothers stuff? Leslie Grace, I think it is.
Yeah, from In the Heights.
Yeah, and she's a Latina singer and actress. And here's something that I noticed. Let me see if I can bring this up. And hold on. And we're gonna alt tab. Is that gonna work? Okay, hold on. I got it. I'm cooking with all cylinders here. All right. This is the first still from that movie. The costume is pure Batgirl Burnsides, which I love Batgirl Burnsides, so I'm not upset about this. But I saw this, and then I thought of this. Can I do it? See the fang thing? There she's standing. And there's the fangs, and there she's standing. And also, Brendan Fraser has been cast as Firefly. So we know that Firefly, who is the big villain in this one, is going to be Milkman. And everyone loves Brendan Fraser because he's just a mensch. We all love him. We're so happy that he's getting work again. This is something that's not talked about very much, but he dropped out of movies because he was legitimately sexually harassed and assaulted by a gay male producer. And he just had issues, and he kind of broke down and stopped doing things for a while. And he wasn't believed, and especially as a guy trying to come forward with those allegations. It didn't go well, and so he just kind of left for a while and gave up for a bit until the Me Too movement happened, and then he felt he could speak then, and then it started him on a path to come back. But we all love Brandon. He's never heard anybody say a bad thing about him, and I'm so happy he's back. And even if he's playing a bad guy in this, he's also playing Robot Man in the Doom Patrol series on the WB, which is just filthy and naked people and cursing and blood and guts, everything. It's very entertaining. Do not have your kids watch that with you. I turned it on the first episode, and my daughter Stella was sitting on the couch next to me, and I'm like, I want to check out Doom Patrol. I always like them. And then there's a sex scene just almost immediately with bare ass naked. I'm like, oh God. If it had been a curse word or the violence had started getting too much, it would have been okay. We could have shut it off and we would have had a conversation of why did we have to just go straight to go into Bone Town? I'm like, God. Never fails. I also played the Witcher video game, and invariably whenever one of the kids would walk in the room, there would be naked stuff happening, which doesn't happen for a big chunk of the game, but when it did happen, it was like a summoning spell for children that would go on.
that is just the way of the world. That's Murphy's Law. That's how all TV shows work. It's like, Game of Thrones, it's mostly about dragons, except for this part. And this part. And also this part. I love Firefly as a character was so interesting. I loved his origin story as a special effects designer who's clearly already at the edge. And so I think basically in Batgirl, what you're seeing is right as someone is cresting, being able to function in the world and falling just fully going into psychopathy?
From what we can tell, he intentionally overloaded the special effects for an explosion so that it doused an actress with flammable fluid and lit her on fire, and she ended up getting burns over 80% of her body.
Yeah,
maybe not to live, and he liked it. And then that's so when he goes to partner up with Killer Moth, he invents his supervillain persona. He lights up at the mention of Batgirl, and that's where you get. It's just a brief moment, but you really get the feeling that he likes lighting women on fire, which is not, for as far as like personality quirks. That's one that gets swipe right or the left. Which one's the left? Left is I don't do the dating thing, but he's that's a pretty bad one. So he even before he's in the costume, the sense of menace is just up 1,000-fold. And that another thing that's interesting to bring up is how out of sequence the books are written. Almost every book opens with action sequences that take place at other times, with her narrating over them, and then we cut back and forth in time. And I never got confused by that. That is a trick that people play sometimes, and it can leave you going, "What the heck? When's this happening?" Stuff never happened in this one. I was able to follow it really well, which is the sign of good writing and clear art, because both of those are necessary to give that sense of time and place and to make it all work. So, so I did appreciate that. They open with action almost every time. First, like half of it, it's always flashing back to the very first fight with Killer Moth when he's at the masquerade party, and then a little bit later we start going to other action scenes that happen. My favorite was Killer Moth's imaginary story where he's beaten up all Batman, Robin, and Batgirl. And turns out he's just getting drunk at a bar and telling his woes to a figure in the shadows who turns out to be Firefly. But that's because I'm reading that story and I couldn't remember exactly how things went. I said, I don't remember this. I went and then went, oh, okay, there we go. But,
poor guys in the old noodle. I mean, I feel like also as one story between all the issues, they do such a great job of showing kind of Gotham in its entirety. Like you go to the docks, you go to the subway. Barbara clearly lives in kind of a suburb. You go to the mansions, and then of course the big city is like the big part of Gotham. But they also they show you Condiment Man. I feel like Polka Dot Man's in the background somewhere.
He is in the background.
And then you see like the really bad, like, so it's kind of runs the gamut of like, oh, like these are the goofball characters, and then these are the ones who are really going to hurt you. Right. So it's, it's kind of the whole, where people always say like, oh, this is a dark and gritty, or this is goofy. It kind of shows you that they can all exist together.
There's a spectrum there. And she goes through, starting out with these low level punks and then ending up, fighting people that really could do some damage, like Blockbuster and Firefly. And then we have hints of even more and worse out there. When she's training against simulations of like Clayface and the Joker and the really big tough Batman villains, and she's doing a good job holding her own. We also had Dr. Fate in there. They mentioned fate and destiny and foreshadowing a bunch of times. Dr. Fate says that he foresees triumph and tragedy in her future. Predicting she's going to be a great hero, and then eventually have the tragedy of the Joker happen. I noticed that you bought the like Comixology version or something. You got the issues on your phone. I just want to do a sales pitch for the deluxe version here that you can get in hardback, because it has sketches and artwork from Marcos in the back, so you can see all his character studies and how he decided to draw everyone. And his like idea for Barbara's like homemade ninja costume when she's breaking into the JLA, thumbnails he made for the different pages, so you can see him.
That was a great cover.
Right. Here's a quick sketch, and then here's his finished pen and inks of the same thing. So I always love seeing behind the scenes and seeing process for some of this stuff. And again, what I liked about this is it isn't necessarily the most elegant and graceful pose that she's gotten herself in there, but she looks like she's kicking ass. So you don't care. I mean, very often there's a tendency to make the heroes and stuff look like they're doing ballet while the madness is just unfurling around. And this looks like she is just, doing Krav Maga there and taking them out.
You can hear the crunch.
You can hear the crunch. And then there's just pencils. So yeah, I always love this kind of behind the scenes, looking at the art thing and seeing how the artist develops concepts and ideas and how they, come up with character designs and stuff. They have a whole section of that in the back of the hardback. I don't know if it's in the paperback or not, but I've become a hardback snob. So if you can get that one, I recommend it. So where do we put this on? I think we're about out of time. We need to wrap up. Oh, if we had comments, I wasn't paying attention. We have comments. Oh, we got hi John, hi Vivian, and good evening. So do. And I just realized I wasn't monitoring my tabs. So what's your summation? Where do you put Batgirl Year One on kind of the spectrum? Who is this book for?
Everybody. I think probably maybe not under 8 years old. I think there's some disturbing stuff in there once Firefly gets involved because he's clearly deranged and that's maybe a little bit dark, but I could totally imagine like a 12-year-old version of myself really wanting to live this life and really, getting behind a story like this. But I think also there is no outright girl power moment in here that I think would make a 40-year-old dude say like, I can't read this, like this is for girls, right? So well, I think
considering who it's written by, I'm not surprised, but yeah.
I mean, like for the good and the bad, like just by existing, she's already creating her own like inclusivity. Right. So I'm kind of like, that can go by itself, but yeah, I definitely say this is basically for anybody who loves a good Gotham story.
Yeah, I think it's just a well-crafted superhero story. If you're looking for some deep dive where there's like really deep underlying themes and talking about humanity and man versus them, no, none of that. It's basically a story about people that like dressing up in costumes and punching each other, but it's a really well-done version of that story. This is one that when I read it, I went, if they decided to make the Batgirl movie just this, if this was the Batgirl movie, I would be very happy. It is very cinematic. It is very well told. And it gives a, Batgirl's story had been told before in brief in the very first issue where she's introduced. It's this whole costume party thing, and they did it the same way in the Batman TV show. People will tell you that she was created for the Batman TV show, and then they decided to put her in the comics because she was popular. That didn't happen. She was in the comic books first. The guy who put her in the comics actually told that story, so I don't know what he was thinking, but I saw a little comics historian thing where they unpacked that, and no, that's not true. She was in the comics first. But the costume party, that whole portion of the story had been told, but it was just in shorthand really quickly, and then 2 seconds later, she's a member of the Bat team. There's none of this like slowly developing over time. I really love that they took the time to expand out their origin. They started that trend, Frank Miller did with Batman Year One, which actually had come almost a decade or so earlier. It was David Mazzucchelli, beautiful book, by the way. I love that one too. And that's what they based Batman Begins on a little bit, the Christopher Nolan story. The idea of going back to a superhero's origin and really spending some time at that portion before they're fully formed as a superhero was revolutionary. Up until that point, we'd always been introduced to these guys when they were already just kicking butt and taking names for the most part. And so like from that spun out things like the Netflix Daredevil show, where he doesn't get a proper Daredevil costume until the last episode or two. The whole time he's running around in that, which was also based on a storyline written by Frank Miller, because that's what he does. Brutal superhero stories about people bleeding. So Frank was good at that. There is no one that could out-gritty Frank Miller. I don't think that's his kind of
he's also the one who it's like, you can't kill somebody. It's like, just because you don't see the person die on the page does not mean what you just showed us did not kill that person. Same thing with Daredevil. Like he'd like kick someone down the stairs and it's like, that person died. And he's like, no, we didn't show it, so it doesn't count.
No, we didn't show him dead. I mean, Batman has that problem all the time. He's throwing batarangs at like sticking somebody's skull and they fall over. I'm like, yeah, that's not good for him. We'll just say he's stunned. But this is not dark and gritty. We didn't show enough of it probably, but the art in this is just phenomenal. The covers, the design work in the covers reminds me a bit of like David Aja from Hawkeye, that just really strong design sense of, of how he arranged figures and stuff to create, negative space and positive space. And it was just a great sense of proportion and stuff.
I wrote down Hawkeye. I wanted to ask you how big of an influence you thought this had on Hawkeye.
It's Marcos Matan's from it's Cantonese or Kalimantan or something. What's that European country that's close to Catalan? Yeah, thank you. He's in Spain, right? Region of Spain. Mm-hmm. He's from there, and I believe David Aja is also Spanish from Spain. So not just Spanish language speaking. I think he's from Spain. So they're in the same neighborhood. Maybe they were. You might say it's a European influence because Europe has its very own, kind of comics language and style that has been interesting to see applied to American comics. They did it with writing when they brought over Neil Gaiman and Alan Moore and Grant Morrison. They brought this. All of a sudden, the mainstream American comics publishers noticed that there was great work being done overseas, and they brought these guys over. And the same thing as scanning and digitalization and being able to move files over the internet happened. We've seen art also move all over the globe, and we're getting great artists from Europe. We're getting artists from the Philippines, from South America, like the Ha brothers. I think I'm trying to remember the name. The guys at Umbrella Academy, Gabriel Moon. They're both from Argentina, I think. So it's that's been a neat thing as comics have progressed. It's not that we would never get stuff from other countries before, but collaborations across between countries is very difficult, and because the art would have to be physically mailed back, and that was problematic. And now that doesn't have to happen anymore, and you can instantly zap files around the world, I like that we've been expanding kind of our visual language. Javier Peludo, also a great artist from Spain, worked with these guys. This same team did a Robin miniseries right before this, which is what gave them the green light to do the Batgirl miniseries. And Javier Peludo was part of that team. He's another great artist from Spain. I hadn't really thought about that, the fact that there are so many of them cropping up in Spain. They must have good art over there. Yeah. So we love it and everything else. So go buy it. I do really recommend the deluxe edition. You will not regret this purchase. It's fun to look at all the sketches in the back, and it's just the covers in particular are some of the prettiest things you will ever set your eyes on. They're so well done. This image of Batgirl is probably one of my favorite images of Batgirl ever. I love the kind of underlighting and putting her in shadow and the cape underneath. I always thought the cape looks like it might be the bat signal or Batman in reverse, upside down, and nice. There's a lot of cool stuff going on in this book. And I love the way that he draws youthful Barbara Gordon, just in the face, very round face, very very minimal lines. In comic book world especially, every line you put on someone's face makes him look older. So he did a great job of communicating the idea of her expression and face without doing too much detail and making her look old. So buy this book, and then we need to talk about what we're doing next month, which is The World of Wakanda. And if I had been together, I would have downloaded a picture of that. Wakanda Forever. It is a book that does not follow the Black Panther, not directly anyways. It is a book focusing on two members of the Dora Milaje. I believe they're lesbians. And so I'm just getting out of the way early because that's where I go anyways. And it's written by Roxane Gay, who is a fantastic Black author who's, I think, won a Pulitzer Prize. She's really good stuff. And it had won some awards and things, and I've never read it. That's one of the few books that we brought up that have not been, that I've not actually read. So I'm really looking forward to getting into that. Okay, I think that'll do it for us. If you have any last thoughts you want to throw out there about art or anything else that struck you in this book?
It has to be seen to be believed and appreciated.
Yeah, so go buy it, enjoy it. It's a fantastic book, and we will see you next month with The World of Wakanda. All right, bye, guys.